All right, welcome back to our meeting, the morning meeting of the Environment Committee. We're going to shift gears to H778 and hear from Green Mountain Power's dam safety engineer. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. My name is Johnny Fenton Henry. I'm the Chief Dam Safety Engineer at Green Mountain Power. This is a position that I've held since May 2024. Just a little bit on my background. I'm a licensed professional civil engineer in Vermont and New Hampshire, and I have about 15 years of work experience that is mostly within the fields of heavy civil geotechnical engineering, and the majority of that is within dam safety. I have prepared some notes here that I can go through. These are just really to keep me on track. I'm happy to answer questions along the way if there's interest in going down any particular topic in more detail. But before we get going, I would just like to take the opportunity to thank everybody for the opportunity to be in this room to present this. And thank you for all the hard work that you do on the Environment Committee. I think what is helpful for what I think is most helpful for this committee is to provide an overview of what we are doing at Green Mountain Power relative to our dam safety program. I'm going to focus more on the high hazard potential dams that we have, because that's specifically what the bill is looking at. But I am happy to answer questions on other dams also. So we operate 6 medium-sized high-hazard dams within the state of Vermont. 4 of those dams are regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, and 2 of those are regulated by the Vermont Public Utility Commission. First basic question, what is a high-hazard dam? A high-hazard dam is a regulatory definition that focuses on the expected consequences in the result of a failure of that dam. Specifically for high-hazard dams, failure of a high-hazard dam is expected to result in probable loss of life downstream. What this definition does not include, this definition does not consider the condition of the dam. So it is not possible to make a risk determination based only on the hazard criteria from that definition. A little bit of background in terms of how we operate our facilities. At Green Mountain Power, safety, including dam safety, is our #1 priority for all projects, for all operations, and all practices that we conduct. Dam safety is heavily ingrained in our culture and our mentality, and it is what we bring to work every day with us. We implement and measure ourselves against the most stringent regulatory criteria when it comes to dam safety. For us, that is comparing ourselves to the FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, guidelines and rules. Those go beyond what the state dam safety regulatory groups require. And that is a practice that we employ across our fleet, not just on our FERC regulated dams. So we apply the FERC methodology to our dams that are regulated by the Vermont PUC. My position at Green Mountain Power, again, as I said, I'm a licensed civil engineer with a lot of experience in dam safety, and my position is 100% focused on dam safety. I don't have other responsibilities within my organization. That is the program that I manage, and that is what I do. And within that, I have excellent technical resources to support me, both internally and externally to GMP. And I'm also involved in various different technical conferences, seminars, I'm going to the United States Society of Dams Conference in May, to make sure that we're staying engaged within the dam safety industry and keeping on track of things. The overarching objectives of our dam safety program, relatively straightforward. That is to have safe dams within our fleet.
Can you remind us, you might have said, and I missed it, but how many dams are you responsible for?
The dams that we're responsible for, let me just double check my sheet here. We operate 40 dams within New Hampshire, and 6 of those are categorized as high hazard dams.
The New Hampshire meaning on
Or sorry, my bad. Sorry, within Vermont, yes. Sorry, slip of the tongue there. Yeah, so we operate 40 dams within Vermont, and yeah, 6 of those are high hazard. Okay. So yeah, again, so the objective is the program is safe dams. And when we say a safe dam, we're looking at that from a hydraulic standpoint, from a structural standpoint, from a geotechnical standpoint, and from a civil engineering standpoint. Specifically, what that means is that dams are required to be safe for all operations conditions. So that's a sunny day. So that's any time that we have normal flows in the river, they need to be safe for that event. And they need to be safe for seismic events. And then they also need to be safe for storm events. The storm event is probably the one that requires the most conversation here. And so all of the GMP high hazard dams are required to pass extreme order of magnitude events. Specifically, this is a term known as the probable maximum flood. And this is a storm that through a rigorous weather study is found to be the largest storm that could happen in Vermont. And specifically in Vermont, that storm is modeled as a tropical storm or hurricane that stalls over Vermont and brings between 22 and 30 inches of precipitation. To contrast that, so we know that informally as the Noah's Ark storm, essentially, and that is the upper criteria of what is possible and what dams are designed for. And all of our high hazard facilities are able to pass those events. Just by contrast, so that 22 to 30 inches of
You just say
rainfall.
what amount of time that would be?
So the modeled storm, it's a 72-hour duration storm.
Thank you.
Yeah. And by contrast, Irene statewide brought 3 to 7 inches of rainfall. There were some isolated areas where we saw up to 11 inches. July 23, 4 to 9 inches of rainfall in a slightly smaller area. The Calais gauge topped out at around 9 inches through that storm event. And then in July 24, we saw typically 3 to 5 inches of rain, some isolated areas of 6 to 7 inches through that storm.
Representative Austin.
Just to clarify, so your role is to make sure these dams are safe in the event of that extreme weather occurring, the 72 inches or whatever. I was 10, 30, 22 to 30.
22 to 30 inches of
That's what, when you're looking and inspecting, you're making sure that the dams could sustain that level of weather.
That is correct. That is the criteria for the high hazard sites. I will say that it is not me, it is our program. And I think in the next bit of this, I'm going to kind of talk through a little bit more what those resources look like and what specifically that program looks like to make sure that we get there. But yes, that is the criteria. On that, how do we get to that prudent dam safety program? So we start with inspection frequency. And again, the FERC rules for high hazard sites. FERC dams, high hazard dams, they're inspected annually. And we will FERC from their New York regional office, they will send out another dam safety engineer who's also a licensed professional civil engineer. We will come out, we will meet with them, and we will inspect the projects. We don't have that resource from Vermont PUC that comes out with us, but we do our own inspections. We document our own inspections for the non-FERC sites. We still go through that process with those. And then we have on a daily basis, we have our field personnel, our operators. They are trained to monitor critical dam safety features of projects and to collect data. On an approximately monthly basis, I'm collecting that data, I'm reviewing that. So we're summarizing everything as we go. Really to categorize the program, it's about inspection, evaluation, and then mitigation. I think the biggest piece that goes with the dam safety program in accordance with the FERC regulations would be the independent consultant program. And so on a 5-year basis, we will engage with a team of qualified independent consultants who will come out with us and they will do a detailed inspection of these projects. The requirements for the independent consultant team is that they're required to be licensed professional civil engineers with at least 10 years of experience specific to a given discipline. And because we're looking at civil, hydraulic, geotechnical, usually that's more than one person to span that range. And because of the somewhat niche skill set that's associated with dam safety, we tend to find that those teams are typically made up of 2 to 4 professional civil engineers with, on the order of 20 years of experience that make up those teams. And yeah, we're seeing seasoned professionals in the prime of their career coming out to look at those sites. And
They're hired by you or by FERC?
so those are hired by GMP, by Green Mountain Power. But what is also important to kind of understand with this is that FERC has a lengthy list of rules and criteria that require independent consultants to report out on any potential conflicts of interest. They take the independent portion of this work very, very seriously. So, for example, an engineer is not allowed to review their own work or their own company's work. They are required to attest that they have not been put under any duress to make any decisions, that their conclusions are independent. There is an expectation that we provide the data to those consultants and that we work with them and that we accompany them through the process. But they are very strictly independent consultants, but they are paid by GMP, yes.
And are you seeing FERC regulations changing, given that we're seeing all kinds of regulations changing right now? Have they been shifting?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the FERC regulations, they changed most recently in 2022. And the biggest change that the FERC regulations had was when it comes to risk analysis. And the process prior to 2022 was that every 5 years you would go through a risk analysis process, which is known as a potential failure modes analysis. And I'll answer this question, then I can kind of go back and dive into that. But that process has now changed. And so what we have now is we have a periodic inspection and a comprehensive inspection. And so the comprehensive inspection goes into a much deeper risk analysis process. and that's done every 10 years. And then the periodic inspection would be in between. So that's changed a little bit since 22. That would probably be the biggest update to the rule change in 2022. And to dive into the risk assessment, so for all of our sites, we have done a detailed risk assessment. And what this really looks like is we have the independent consultant team. We do a detailed visual inspection. They will review the project analysis, project records, and then we get together in a room for a day or two, and we have the independent consultant team. We are there, our field operators are there, and we come up with a list of potential failure modes. So that's really just thinking out every possible way that we think that this dam could fail. And we then, with the team, will go through with the project records, the designs, the calculations, the analysis, and then we'll categorize those potential failure modes into ones that are credible, non-credible, or more information required. And what this risk analysis does is it just helps us to go take a deeper dive into the specific features of the dam, and to really just assess whether or not we have any vulnerabilities. It's really a process where we take what we know about the dam, we set that to one side temporarily to go through this process, and then we bring the two together to come up with that. And it's for us, it's a really good process of just checking that we're aware of any of the potential vulnerabilities that we have. It could also be used as a process for prioritizing which projects to do. Also, and it could be helpful from that standpoint.
Yeah, what Representative Chapin?
I know you might get to this later, but I want to make sure not to miss it. So, and while I'm thinking about it. So, in that risk assessment, I'm thinking about the situation that we had in Marshfield, where you have where that dam has an emergency release system. And there's different types of emergency release systems. And it's been described to us how you sort of, once you pull it, you can't shut it. And so I'm curious about all of this risk management and prioritization, like all makes sense from the company's perspective on the infrastructure that you own and operate. Wondering how much it considers risk downstream versus risk to your infrastructure and power capabilities, and just how the downstream impacts. And so in the case of this, like, are you considering putting in a different kind of emergency release? Does that kind of project end up getting prioritized?
Yeah, absolutely. I can answer that question.
We're gonna get there. I'm happy to just.
No, for sure. I can answer that question. And so the potential failure modes analysis does look at risk across the board from that standpoint, but to maybe look more specifically at the Marshfield project. So the normal operating pond level for the Marshfield project is below the flow invert of that emergency spillway system. So that emergency spillway system has a gate system that is about 6.5 feet tall, but on a sunny day situation that does not have water behind it. There's there's three outlets. So there's outlet through the penstock, through the powerhouse. There's then a second service spillway associated with that site. So that service spillway can be operated remotely, remotely operated from our Colchester control center. It can also be operated on site by personnel that are there. But that can be opened slowly, so that it does not result in flows downstream that would be potential to impact and exacerbate flooding downstream. The emergency spillway system has a stanchion system that contains stop logs. And in a situation where that system would be operated, there are two bays. and the stanchions would essentially drop, and the logs on one bay at a time would release. The thing to keep in consideration here is that this bay would only be used in extreme order of magnitude events, such as, we discussed the Noah's Ark storm. And in those extreme order of magnitude events, it is reasonable to consider that the river downstream would already be at high flood stage. So while this system does drop and it does activate that spillway, the incremental rise and impact difference that would be felt downstream would not be a significant rise in water level downstream. And you are correct that that system cannot be replaced during the storm. So we cannot, go back in the middle of a storm and put those stop logs back in. But then the thing to keep in mind there is that we have the normal pond level is below the flow invert of that system. So really, when the storm passes and water levels return to normal, the pond at Molly Falls is returning to normal also. So we will not be releasing any of the lake beyond the normal pond situation. Does that answer that?
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that your risk analysis that you do for a particular dam does take into account risks downstream in the event of, I guess, any of these kinds of releases.
Yes.
Yes. And so you do take into account potentially changing these kinds of physical attributes of a dam based on that risk. But in the Molly's Falls situation, you don't believe that spillway design to be a particular risk for downstream communities.
Yeah, and so I'll add to that a little bit. That's correct. I'll add to that a little bit, and I'll say that this is a system that is evaluated by your independent consultant teams, and this release system, this emergency spillway. So my background, I've worked as a dam safety regulator in the state of New Hampshire. I've seen similar systems on many high hazard dams within New Hampshire and in Vermont as well. It's not a particularly novel system, and it is something that I've seen on a lot of high hazard dams, and it is not a system that we have any concerns with. It is regularly inspected. So I'm sort of jumping ahead a little bit into the sort of EAP section of this, but this would fall into the category of emergency equipment. And so as part of our EAP program, we're testing this twice a year. So twice a year, our operators will go out and they'll test the mechanisms on this gate system and the service spillway as well, to make sure that everything is in functional order and that it is available if it is needed, but that need for that particular gate is reserved for an emergency situation. Okay, thank you. Can't really remember where I got that. So I was talking about the potential failure mode analysis, and I think once we go through these rigorous inspection programs and evaluations, it is natural that we do from time to time come up with issues that we look to improve, and that gate system would be a good example of a feature that is looked at in that level of detail. And just to kind of give an overview of what this might look like, a typical maintenance project for us that might consist of resurfacing concrete on a concrete spillway. A typical upgrade might include Molly's Falls is a good example. So the service spillway was upgraded there within the last 5 or so years. So that would be a good example of an upgrade system. And then from time to time we do get into heavier civil geotechnical construction projects. An example of that would be if we went through our risk criteria and we had concerns about the erodibility of soils downstream of our dam, We might put in, an energy dissipation structure or some sort of subsurface cutoff wall to mitigate against those. But the takeaway that I'm kind of trying to give here is that this independent consultant program started in around the 1980s. So since the 1980s, we've had a lot of very qualified independent consultants that have looked at all of these dams. As of the last findings of these reports, and I believe all of the reports that we've received from these, our high hazard sites have found to be in good working order, and there have been no observations or issues anticipated to be detrimental to public safety on our high hazard sites, or any of our sites that have received independent consultants evaluation. The other pillar of dam safety, if you will, sort of changing the direction of this a little bit, is the emergency action plan program. For all of our high hazard sites, we have emergency action plans. So I guess the first question is, what is an emergency action plan? An emergency action plan is a formal written document that identifies emergency conditions, defines responsibilities, and establishes protocols to mitigate the potential impact of a dam failure. Some of the specifics that go into that, as we discussed earlier, it discusses all of the emergency equipment associated with that project. We already discussed floodgates, but this will be backup batteries, this will be generators, this will be alternative means of communications. How we would function through these projects in an emergency situation. It will reference the monitoring capabilities that we have. So at Green Mountain Power, we have two control centers that are operated on a 24/7, 365 basis. One is in Colchester and the other is in Rutland. And at any given moment, we have lots of high-tech instrumentation at our sites. We have pond levels, we have pressure gauges, we have high-resolution adjustable angle night vision cameras. So our control center is able to constantly monitor these sites. Our control center receives annual dam safety training. So they know and understand what abnormal conditions look like and on what to look for. And then we also have a field team. They visit the sites most work days, but they also have on-call time. So at any given moment, if our control center observes abnormal conditions, they can dispatch a field PPW, power production worker. We call them to the site to evaluate, to get a better look at something. So, we've had, recently, the weather patterns that we've been in, right? So there's ice on the camera. I can't see this. So the control center will send somebody out to go and clean off ice off of, a camera so that they can get a view of that. On our generation equipment, I mean, sometimes there's, alarms that go off, right? So, if we have a water goes in through the intake structure, sometimes that clogs with debris. If there's, debris there, our control center sees it, they'll send out one of our power production workers to look at that and to just get a second set of eyes on the structure. I am rambling a bit, but yeah, so I guess a couple of things that are really useful within the emergency action plan. So there's inundation maps, and the inundation maps, they communicate to the emergency responders the potential areas that would be inundated, flooded, resultant of a hypothetical breach of a dam. I think one thing to kind of note about these inundation maps, so we talk about the bookends, and so the inundation maps run from the impacts associated with a sunny day breach. So that's that's when there is not a floods coming into the dam. It's if the dam were to breach on a sunny day, what that would look like. But then we also have maps that show what that would look like in a storm situation. And again, with these storms, we're looking at the probable maximum floods. We're looking at a flood that the dam is, from a civil, hydraulic, geotechnical, structural standpoint, safely able to pass. And then we're looking at a hypothetical failure of that structure at the maximum water pond elevation. So we are looking at what is possible with this, not necessarily what is probable for these. So just something to consider when we look at these. There have been situations in the past where people have confused these inundation areas with the 100-year FEMA boundary. So the 100-year FEMA boundary is a flood that has a probability. So we have a 1% chance any given year of receiving that flood. With the breach of a dam that is, inspected, evaluated, and we do a lot of mitigation work on this. That probability isn't there. It's a much more remote situation. The second thing that we have in our EAPs that's very useful is we have notification flowcharts. So this is a compilation of all of the contact information for the emergency responders, for local, state, federal agencies that would be involved in a situation, should a failure occur. And those are updated, they're checked on a regular basis. We have election day coming up, so some name changes there, but this is a collection of information that the phone numbers, the contact information, this is regularly checked on at least an annual basis, or more often if we know of changes. And then probably for us, the biggest difference from the protocols that we follow in accordance with the FERC system and the state system is that on an approximately 5-year basis, we will work through functional exercises for our high hazard sites. And what that looks like, we had one for Marshfield in 2024. We had one for the Lamoille last year. We have one scheduled this year for Silver Lake, and then we have Chittenden scheduled for next year. But this is really just a great opportunity for us to spend a day with emergency managers, at the state, local, and federal level. We will engage with an independent consultant, different independent consultant to the one doing the inspections, but they'll come in and they'll facilitate this. It usually starts with, we'll go through the EAP, we'll go through all that information with the group, and then there's a hypothetical scenario that they simulate and that we work through that. The tabletop is where we work through that as a group. And then the functional is a bit more than that. The functional is where we all split into our own different work groups. We go into different rooms and we, simulate what a dam failure might look like and what everyone would be doing in that situation. And for me, the benefit that comes from that is almost like 50% icebreaker. So, it's good just when you go into these emergency situations, heaven forbid we were ever in that situation, to know who the emergency managers are, to know who the players are, to have that, face-to-face interaction with those groups. But we always come away from that with just thoughts on how we could do things better, how we can learn from the emergency managers, and also, for us to respect the command of the emergency managers as well. I think maybe one thing that's worth pointing out here is that one thing that the EAP program does not do is that it does not put Green Mountain Power as the incident commander, should an incident, occur. That is the responsibility of the, emergency responders, and that is because of the authority that they have. And that's about what I've got in terms of, prepared notes. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I think there'll be a bunch. I'm gonna thank you for your presentation. And then you may have kind of already gotten to this, but I want to, how do you work with the host towns and the downstream towns? And are the incident command emergency responders that you're referring to typically volunteers or professionals?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me just check that I understand this question. So, how do we work with the municipalities? Is this?
Teams are located in,
Okay.
I'm assuming they're part of these functional exercises and part of your planning process. Maybe just flesh that out a little bit, but then related to that, who are the incident commanders?
Yeah, so the incident commanders are, a good example would be yesterday in Rutland. I was at a meeting with the Chittenden group. So I don't know if you're familiar with Jan Sarakis of Pittsford. She kind of heads up that group. So we have quarterly meetings with that group. It's largely us sitting in, listening and participating where it's appropriate to do so. But that's a situation where we meet on a fairly regular basis. We're able to hear what the towns and municipalities are doing.
I don't know. I'm not familiar with her.
She's the emergency management director in Pittsford.
For the town?
For the town, yeah. And so yesterday, the attendees at that were, we had Pittsford, we had Proctor, we had Rutland Town, we had Rutland City at that meeting. We had, hopefully I don't butcher this, Department of Health was there. We had Vermont Emergency Management. We had the Rutland Community Planning Board at that. I understand that some of these are a mix of full-time paid positions and volunteer positions. A lot of the time we see fire chiefs. I think it's one of those things that, a lot of municipalities in Vermont wear more than one hat, so to speak. So, it's common to see that the fire chief is also the emergency management director. But that was yesterday. So that's one example of something that I attended. But the functional exercises for us, I think that's really where we can add, just have that interaction, because, we get the local emergency responders there, but we also get state and we get federal. So we'll have, like the weather service there. We'll have, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission there, for the FERC sites.
You coordinating, like yesterday's meeting, was that brought GMP, or who coordinated that?
Yesterday's meeting was not coordinated by GMP, that was tended by GMP. But the tabletop and functional exercises, those are put on by GMP. We're putting up, this office space to do that. We're, organizing the invite list. We're engaging with a consultant to come up with the scenario for the exercise.
Who did yesterday's though?
The yesterday's was organized by that group that I cannot remember what this stands for, but it is the CREAP group, CREAP.
That's a group over the last 15 years that has been working.
Can you say for the record who you are?
I'm Eric Vaughan, I'm the director of Vermont Emergency Management. That group basically built itself in a response to what they perceive as a danger to their potential communities. So that group got together, the EMPs of all those local towns. They brought in all the variable entities that might be involved, and they get together and they work through response plans. As you talk about EOPs, that's what that group is building, is an emergency operations plan. What would we do if they connect with Green Mountain Power and their EAP? So that's a grassroots group.
Yep. And I know you have a question, Sarita, but I'm gonna just finish a
That's
couple.
okay.
You've told us 4 of your high hazard dams in your listing of your functional exercises. What are the other two?
So the other two are projects. So the good example would be the projects that we have on the Lamoille. So we have two high hazard sites, but they are on the same river and they're relatively close to each other. So they would be considered one project. So maybe one thing I can clarify is the functional exercise that will be for a river basin. So on the Lamoille River, where we have these two projects that are, I believe, within a quarter mile of each other on the same river, we would have an exercise that covers both of those facilities. The similar situation would be we have Goshen Reservoir and Silver Lake down in Middlebury area, just upstream of Lake Dunmore. So that would be the same situation where we have two structures that are within the same inundation area. So the same functional exercise would cover both of those projects. They're clustered, if you will, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Representative Austin.
One is, can we get a copy of your testimony or do we already have it? That's just.
I'm happy to provide, I don't know what the procedural is, but I'm happy to provide.
We just send it to our committee assistant, Kat.
So this is a testimony I've been waiting to hear about emergency management with dams and, what kind of oversight. And we haven't heard from other people. So I don't know if this is going on across the state. But I'm wondering, would GMP want authority to be in the, to be in the command center or the control center?
Well, authority is an interesting word from that standpoint. So we would wish to collaborate in all of these situations. And so certainly in terms of the EOC, we would be contributing to in whatever way we can should an incident ever occur. But I think that in terms of authority, the authority falls with the emergency management team. And, I don't think anybody wants, me coming into their town, exerting authority on anyone. I think there's some sovereignty associated with that.
Except that you have expertise that they might not have that could, whatever, save lives or prevent a disaster. So, I mean, I understand that,
Yeah.
And I know Vermont and their municipalities and how they operate, but I feel like every town in Vermont should have this process that you're talking about. And I know it's probably very expensive, but we're talking about lives here, and I am very concerned about whether, I don't know this, but whether we have this level of oversight and follow through and implementation and just really the worst case scenario, we thought this through.
Yeah, so I can speak to that a little bit. And so as I read and as I understand the EOP bill, I would say because of the protocols that we put in place and through our collaboration, and we do have experts within our organization and resources to call in where needed. I think that the perceived gap between an emergency action plan and an emergency operations plan is relatively thin when it comes to GMP projects. And wherever this lands, wherever this goes, we're going to keep doing what we believe is a prudent practice. And we're open to ideas and suggestions. If the industry feels there's better ways to do things, we're open to that idea. But I think that we're going to keep doing what we're doing, which seems to work well. And keep having the functional exercises. I think that's probably the biggest break between what the state agencies don't require and what FERC does require. I think that's a big one. And that gets into training, it gets the right people in the room. And yeah, from our standpoint, that's something that we're going to continue to do.
Very helpful. Representative Tagliavia.
I think Representative Norris.
Mine got answered, thank you.
You mentioned abnormal conditions, normal pond level, and you said something about the weather service.
Yeah.
With respect to the floods in 2023, I believe it was, one of the contributing factors that I heard come up was soil saturation.
Yeah.
We had such a wet spring that when we did finally get all the rain, you know, in a drier condition prior, maybe we wouldn't have had all the runoff. I mean, we had mudslides in numerous towns, stuff like that. How much in your risk assessment going forward does that play into trying to figure out, okay, do we want normal pond levels, given we've had such a wet spring? Do we want to actually lower the pond levels? Is that something that you're taking into consideration?
That's a really, really good question. And yeah, thank you for asking that question. We have the capabilities. I'll answer this in sort of two different ways. So we do have the capabilities with our forecasting abilities to look at what's coming in. Certainly, if it's a tropical storm, which the bigger storms would be, we have the ability to see those coming. And we have the ability to make room in our pond to facilitate that storm. And that is something that we do as a practice. But in dam safety, we look a lot at redundancy. And so while this is a prudent practice that we do not assume that that happened when we're looking at the ability of the dam to pass that storm event. So the potential maximum floods, as I said, it's a 72-hour tropical storm, stalls over Vermont, drops 22 to 30 inches of rain. The assumption for us passing that storm is that the soil is soaking wet. So anesthetic conditions, it's called. And so the soil is soaking wet. We've already had, there's another storm that just went past, everything's soaking wet. We also look at, okay, in a prudent situation, we would, drop the pond level. Well, what if we didn't, right? So it looks at that level of redundancy, and that is the storm of design that we are required to pass, and that's what we're designing our dams to do. So there's certainly redundancy that goes into that. I think that, the storms in 23 and 24 and Irene and, so many to talk about, they bring a lot of precipitation, a lot of flooding, a lot of damage, a lot of distress to Vermont. The 23 storm did not stress our high hazard dams because we were able to safely pass those storm events. And it is important to distinguish between what is flooding and what is a dam safety and risk, and not confuse the two. Because in the communities that are downstream, so Vermont was built around a lot of mill buildings in the river. So there's areas, we're sitting in one of them right now that is, prone to flooding. And that's a natural occurrence that happens irregardless of whether or not, Green Mountain Power's dams are there. And so I think I kind of mentioned at the start of this, our dams are medium in size. And that's a definition in the Vermont PUC rules. And so what that means is that we don't have we don't have designed flood capacity within our dams. So if you were to compare, say a Waterbury Reservoir, that is a dam that is designed to protect and to mitigate flooding downstream. For the GMP sites, they're teeny tiny in comparison to that. And we get into a storm situation, we go into what's known as a run of river mode. So what comes into the pond goes out of the pond. So in that situation, we're neither helping or hindering downstream flooding. It's a natural event that occurs with or without us.
I think you just brought up neither helping nor hindering. Is there a way to like you said, okay, if your dams are small compared to some, could there be something in your risk assessment to be designed to try to help?
So the flood of 1927, which was a devastating flood in Vermont. In response to that, the federal government built the Winooski flood control sites. So the Waterbury Reservoir, the various different flood control sites. So that is a response to that situation to prevent flooding. Our tallest dam is about 65 feet tall. Waterbury Reservoir is 187 feet tall. So we're not talking a small project to do that. And, I don't know. It would be quite the logistical project to do that. I mean, certainly that was the 1930s response to the 1927 flood. Is that something that, we're talking hypothetically?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going down a road. Okay.
It's 10 minutes past the hour. This was great testimony.
Thank you.
Very helpful to us. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming in today.